Welcome to another edition of Turn 6 Garage, and today I'm driving a Toyota Fortuner. In this video I'm going to discuss whether you should or shouldn't buy one of these, and what is it like to drive, and what this car seems to have filled that was once a hole in the market due to other cars getting a bit more expensive. So the Fortuner is a Hilux with a wagon body on it pretty much, powered by a 4-cylinder 2.8 litre turbo diesel engine mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission. Basically, it's a Hilux with 7 seats. Still made in Thailand like the Hilux is, and it's pretty much this new craze of putting a wagon body on a ute. So many cars that are like this, and this is a very popular genre in Australia. So, what do these people see in cars like this? Well, there's a few things. Number one is the commanding driving position. You can see over everyone and anyone in this car. Number two is the feeling of space, sort of, although it's not as big as a Land Cruiser or a Prado, it does still feel quite spacious in here. And number three, this almost commanding feeling that you can go any place, anywhere in this car. Now, those are good things to have, and people like them, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. The Fortuner in question is a GXL, and this listed new is $61,000, although until I paint looking more $62,000. So $61,990 for one of these cars in this configuration. Is it worth it? Well, for that money, it is worth it. It's actually quite a reasonable package for the money in terms of space, reliability, resale's really strong, but you're not going to be paying that now. There's a wait list for this car that's about 12 months, and these things are going way more than they're worth new. If you wanted to order a Fortuner for the list price, no dealer markups, you're going to be waiting 12 months. So what about a car like this one here? 2021 car, 21,000 Ks, what are we looking at? $68,990. 7 grand more than it was worth new. Right. So you can see this car as the more practical Hilux, but you have to pay for it. And I mean, you really do have to pay for it if you want it now, or wait until there's more of them coming. What's the Fortuner like as a car? Well, it's quite agricultural. If you're a fan of sports cars and low center of gravity and enjoy turning tight into corners, this isn't your car. It feels like a truck. It idles like a truck with this diesel engine, and the ride is terrible, frankly. I really wish it rode better. It just bounces over every pothole imaginable. It doesn't have much finesse in terms of body control, and the steering is pretty woolly. It's more wonder that the Hilux version failed the Elk test. We know its resale is pretty much blast proof. What about the reliability? Now, this is a Toyota. You would think this reliability record is impeccable, and I hate to say this, but it isn't. The 2.8 litre diesel does have its problems. So while most of this car is pretty robust, the DPF system on this 2.8 has been a question mark for quite a while. The old 3 litre was pretty much bomb-proof. And while this 2.8 goes pretty well for a diesel engine, it's got quite a lot of get up and go, especially in the mid-range, which is really good in trying to overtake people, or tow a caravan, or tow a boat. The engine DPF system is a bit of a concern on this car. It's something you have to ask when you buy it used. Has this car had a new DPF? Has it had a high pressure fuel pump? A lot of the modern diesels, those emissions systems to make the car cleaner, are their worst enemy as they get older. They become harder to fix and they become more expensive. So if you are in the market for one of these things, do realise once it gets older, you're going to have to spend a bit of money to keep it on the road. That's just a diesel of this vintage, a modern diesel. You're going to have these issues: DPFs, fuel pumps, EGRs. an older diesel without all this modern garbage on it is not going to have anywhere near the problems this will have later on. So while this is a modern diesel with its issues, what else should you look for? Well, most of it actually is user dependent. Most of these cars, your biggest concern isn't so much the car, it's the person that's owned it. So you come look at one of these, look underneath, look where it's been, look for signs of corrosion, look for signs of body damage. Because these things get driven in any number of places and they hit things, they go into water. Those things you need to look at. You need to look at the suspension. What has it done? Has it towed? Is the suspension in good shape? It's all the questions you ask about the car's history, which makes it a pretty difficult car to buy used. Because if this thing's done highway miles and it's been well cared for with 160,000 kilometres, that's not a bad car. Because fundamentally all the mechanicals are relatively strong as long as it's been maintained, and there aren't many things that'll be wrong with it. But if this thing's been bashed, crashed and abused, it's going to come back and haunt you. It's going to have those issues with corrosion, and that's because these are cars that will have gone into the water. So some of the government cars and some of the more tropical areas, you really need to look at it. So if the car you're looking at was a tropical government car, like an NT or a North Queensland, really ask that question. Look underneath, really, really be careful of the car. So always consider the area it's come from. So that's one thing. Another thing is, even though this thing has DPF issues, people may sell these things after they've towed a load too big for the car and blown the engine up. So always when you drive this thing, when you first look at it, rev the engine, look in your mirror for any blue smoke. Look for blue smoke everywhere. Both when you're accelerating, see if there's a trail coming out, and when it's revved off cold. So that's the first thing you will do when you get to this thing. Start it up, rev the engine, look for blue smoke. You see blue smoke, not the grey diesel-y type smoke, blue smoke like blown engine, then walk away, because engine rebuilds on the 2.8 are on the expensive side. That's one of the things you really need to look for. So apart from being driven by people who may not be the most caring types, and I do mean some of these being government cars and people not paying for them, they do drive them quite hard, what else do you look for? Well, apart from the obvious issue, DPF engine, there's not much else to worry about this car. Fundamentally, if you service it, it looks after you. The 2.8, apart from that issue, is relatively strong. Not as strong as the old 3 litre, but still a relatively strong engine. And that's reflected in this car's resale. So the cheapest Fortuner you can buy would be a GX 7-8 years old. Cheapest Fortuner you can buy is a GX 7 years old, high 200s. You're looking at mid-low 30s. That's for a high mileage base spec car that was 55 new. So resale wise, if you're going to be looking at buying one of these things new and end up paying $61,000, you're going to have a very good car in 5 years time. So a 5-year-old 2017 Fortuner GXL four-wheel drive like this, looking roughly about anywhere between $40,000 and $45,000 depending on the mileage and configuration of the car. If the car has over 200,000, then maybe we're looking high 30s, but again, if you're looking at between 100,000 and 180,000 kilometers, anywhere between 40 and 42, and lower K cars 43 to 45. So resale wise, it's pretty strong. And if you're looking for a car that does highway Ks and you're okay with the rock hard ride and the somewhat woolly steering, then, and looking to lease it for 5 years, 150,000 kilometers, this is a good car, because fundamentally the return on your investment is pretty strong. The car itself is pretty comfortable in terms of sitting in it, although the ride quality is quite ordinary. This works out quite well as an investment. Now, in terms of accommodation, front's pretty good, rear's pretty good too. If you're 6 foot, you can sit behind a 6 foot, which is pretty good for its class, although the key defining feature between this and some of its competitors is the rear seats. The third row is a bit of a joke. It isn't much you can move the second row forward, but the third row is quite pokey. Ultimately, a Mitsubishi Pajero Sport does have more room in the third row. So if you're some bogan who thinks condom is a work of Satan and you need a car to carry your brood around in, well, you're going to be looking at the Mitsubishi, because 7 seats, it's a proper 7-seater. This, it's 5 with 2 shoved in the rear. But on the plus side, you do get a reasonable sized boot with the 5 seats. Go. The Fortuner makes a lot of sense if you're after a car that is good value for money, very strong resale, and has the promise of being relatively reliable. Now, if this genre of car is your thing, then give this thing a drive. I would say drive this, drive the Everest, and drive the Pajero Sport and the MUX, and think about which one you like best. To me, cars are subjective, and I think if you're in this class, look at all of them, take them all for a drive. Now, personally, I think this is a good car for what it is. If you're looking at plugging a hole that was once a Prado or a Land Cruiser 15 years ago, 60 grand, good full drivability, can go anywhere, this is the car that covers that base very well. So, personally, if you're after a car that replaces your 15-year-old Prado, then this is definitely an upgrade. Now, I do like the way the 100 series drives, and I'm more inclined to buy a petrol car, so I would probably fix up a V8 100 series and rebuild it, because I know it'll last forever. Now, that's just personal preference, but if I was in this market of this kind of car, I'd rather the old 100 series. Although this does have all the modern conveniences, the Apple CarPlay, your safety features, and it's brand new with a warranty. So I think it's not a bad car for this type of car. I don't think I'd personally go out of my way and buy one, because this is not my cup of tea. If you need a car and you live in an area where you don't have decent roads, you need something that can handle the off-road, handle inclement weather, handle anything you throw at it in terms of difficulties on the road, difficulty driving, then this is definitely something you should consider. Overall, the Fortuner's not the most dynamically pleasing car, but it covers its base very well and covers its genre very well. And for that, I commend it. I commend it. Well done, Toyota.